His mistress slid into my DMs, a gallery of their trysts attached to a single venomous caption: "He's leaving you and taking all the money." But by the time her finger hit send, I had already systematically drained every single account that bore his name. My next move was to forward the entire sordid affair to his business partners. They had his assets frozen before the dessert course was even served. The guttural scream he let out when his corporate card was declined? That right there was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard in my life. The notification pulsed on my phone screen at 3:17 p.m. on a completely ordinary Tuesday afternoon. It was a name I didn't recognize. A woman named Chloe, with a message request that was poised to detonate the meticulously crafted illusion of my life. I remember just staring at the preview text, feeling a bizarre sense of detachment from the words on the screen. "He's leaving you and taking all the money." My thumb hovered just above the glass, time itself seeming to stretch and warp in that singular moment before I chose to let the bomb go off. I didn't open it right away. Instead, my gaze drifted upwards to the wall of framed awards and accolades in my home office. Julian Vance, founding partner, legal savant, pillar of the community. My husband's brilliant smile beamed from every photograph. And there I was, Elena Callahan, the ever-present, supportive shadow just outside the edge of the frame. 15 years of marriage, 13 of those years spent painstakingly building Vance Sterling from a desperate whispered dream in our tiny garage apartment into the most prestigious boutique law firm in the entire city. Before we delve deeper into Elena's journey of discovery and righteous retribution, I want to take a quick moment to connect with all of you. If you find yourself drawn to stories about women who reclaim their power from those who so foolishly underestimate them, please consider subscribing to our channel. It's entirely free, and your support is what allows our community to grow and share more stories like this one. Now, let's get back to the moment it all began to unravel. The message could wait another 5 minutes. With a calmness that felt alien even to myself, I opened a new browser tab. I keyed in our banking credentials Julian had no idea I even possessed, and with a series of swift, practiced clicks, I transferred every last dollar from our joint accounts into the separate private one I had quietly established 6 months prior, the day the first unexplained receipt for a dinner for two had tumbled from his coat pocket. When I finally steeled myself and opened Chloe's message, I wasn't shocked by the intimate photographs or her smug, misplaced confidence. The only thing that surprised me was her timing. By the time her thumb had tapped send, I had already executed a full-scale financial evacuation of every account in his name. Some people might call that level of preparation paranoia, but I've always preferred to call it a survival instinct. For 13 years, I had been the silent co-founder of Julian's legal practice, though you would never have known it by looking at the firm's glossy letterhead or the About Us page on its website. I was the one who scheduled his clients, who researched legal precedents until the words blurred and my eyes burned with exhaustion, who drafted the preliminary documents that he would later claim as his own stroke of genius. I kept the books so immaculate they could withstand any audit and maintained our home as the perfect, elegant stage for wooing potential clients over cocktails and canapes. All of this while Julian collected the awards, the firm handshakes, the boundless professional respect. "You're the backbone of this whole operation, Elena," he'd say, planting a patronizing kiss on my forehead like I was a child who had just brought home a good report card, not a partner, never, ever, an equal. I can still vividly recall the night we celebrated the firm's first major victory. It was a complex civil litigation case that no one, not even his own mentor, thought he could win. While Julian basked in the glow of congratulations from the senior partners who had taken a gamble on him, I was the one circulating with trays of champagne flutes, memorizing the names of spouses and children, making quiet mental notes about client allergies, their favorite charities, and any potential conflicts of interest. I was building a comprehensive social database in my mind while simultaneously building a reputation for being the perfect, unassuming hostess. "You should really think about hiring an assistant," I suggested once, somewhere during our 3rd year, when the workload had become a crushing round-the-clock burden. Julian just laughed, his hand resting warmly on my cheek. "Honey, why on earth would I pay someone else to do what you already do so perfectly? We're building our future together." Our future. That phrase became the perpetual carrot dangled just out of my reach, leading me through a string of missed anniversaries, hastily canceled vacations, and the gradual, indefinite postponement of the family we had once so eagerly planned. First, it was until the firm was stable. Then it was until he made senior partner. Then until they finally opened the new downtown office. It was always tomorrow, always just after the next big professional milestone. The first real sign that something had fundamentally shifted wasn't the late nights at the office. Those had been a constant in our lives for over a decade. It was the subtle, almost imperceptible change in Julian's scent when he came home. It was the faint, cloying trace of something floral clinging to his suit jacket, a fragrance that wasn't from any soap, perfume, or product in our shared bathroom. Then came the unexplained weekend conferences that mysteriously never appeared on any official industry calendars. These were small alterations in his routine, things that might have seemed innocuous to anyone else, but blared like neon warning lights to a woman who had spent 15 years studying her husband's habits, like a scholar studies a sacred text. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that successful, loving marriages required an element of trust. Then I noticed the first financial discrepancy. It was just $200 at first, a simple cash withdrawal from our joint checking account that Julian hadn't bothered to mention, which was unusual for us since we had always made it a point to discuss all significant expenses. Then, another $350 the following week, small enough that he could easily explain it away, but large enough to establish a disturbing pattern. My background in financial accounting, the very skill set that had helped Julian establish his firm with flawlessly clean books, was now being turned toward tracking these unexplained, insidious leakages from our shared future. Every single night, after Julian had drifted off to sleep, his steady breathing a rhythm I once found comforting, I would slip out of bed and into the home office. There, in the cool glow of the monitor, I would meticulously document each suspicious transaction. A dinner charge at the Westlake on a night he claimed to be working late at the office. A significant purchase from a high-end jewelry store, Allison's, that never materialized as a gift for me. Hotel charges, not in some distant city, but right here in Port Sterling. The spreadsheet grew, each cell a tiny monument to my secret shame, a growing body of evidence that pointed to either my husband's profound betrayal or my own descent into a paranoid breakdown. "You seem distracted lately," Julian mentioned one evening as I was preparing dinner, the sharp strike of the chopping knife against the cutting board carrying more force than necessary. "Is everything all right at the Volunteer Center?" The Volunteer Center, my supposed new focus now that the firm had grown enough to hire actual paralegals and assistants. It was the convenient explanation for why I was no longer needed at the office day to day, even though I still silently maintained all their financial records remotely. Julian had successfully and seamlessly transitioned me out of his professional life while keeping me firmly tethered to his finances. "Everything's fine," I lied, matching the practiced, easy grace with which he delivered his own constant untruths. "Just thinking about the Aurelian dinner next month, it's a huge opportunity." His eyes immediately lit up at the mention of Aurelian Dynamics, the potential behemoth of a client that could cement Vance Sterling's reputation in the corporate law stratosphere. "That's my girl," he said, his voice oozing with false affection. Always thinking 3 steps ahead. This account could transform everything for us, as if we were still a team. That night, as I reached for Julian's suit jacket to take it to the dry cleaners, I heard it. The distinctive, muffled buzz of a second phone. It wasn't his regular work iPhone, the one that occasionally contained texts I was permitted to see. This was something else, something hidden deep within an interior pocket. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird as my fingers traced the sharp outline of the device. Just as quickly, I withdrew my hand, leaving the jacket hanging undisturbed. Some truths, I realized, require careful, strategic preparation before you can confront them. The following evening, I volunteered to pick up dinner while Julian was working in his study. Instead of driving directly to the restaurant, I parked my car across the street from our house, pulled out the binoculars I'd purchased a week earlier, and waited. After a few minutes, I called our landline. "He just stepped away for a moment, Mrs. Vance," our part-time housekeeper answered. "Would you like me to have him call you back?" "No need," I replied smoothly, my eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before me. Through the magnified lenses, I watched as Julian emerged from the house, a phone pressed tightly to his ear, and walked toward the far end of the garden where he believed he was afforded complete privacy. I couldn't make out his words, but his body language told the entire story. The intimate, conspiratorial lean, the occasional soft laugh that crinkled his eyes, the way his free hand gestured through the air as if he were caressing someone's face. 20 minutes. 20 minutes of watching my husband perform an elaborate ballet of affection for someone else was all the confirmation I would ever need. I drove to the restaurant, ordered our usual Tuesday night takeout, and returned home with a pleasant, unwavering smile fixed firmly in place. That night, as Julian slept soundly beside me, completely oblivious, I made my decision. There would be no dramatic confrontation, no tearful demands for an explanation, no empty promises to change. Instead, I would do what I had always done best. I would work silently, diligently behind the scenes, gathering information, preparing documents, and building an airtight case. Only this time, Julian would be on the receiving end of my meticulous, unwavering attention to detail. The Aurelian Dynamics dinner was exactly 4 weeks away. I had learned patience during 15 years of marriage to a relentlessly ambitious man. I could wait another month to serve the coldest dish of all. The morning after my garden surveillance, I woke before the sun, slipping into my home office with a fresh cup of coffee. The preparations for the Aurelian dinner provided the perfect cover for me to dig even deeper into our finances without arousing suspicion. After all, the firm needed to present an image of impeccable stability to land a client of that magnitude. Logging into our premium credit card account, I began scrolling through the recent transactions, my eyes scanning for anything out of the ordinary. And then, something I hadn't noticed before caught my eye. A charge for $4,200 from Cartier, dated 3 weeks ago. My birthday had passed months earlier. Our anniversary wasn't for another 2 months. That evening, I methodically checked my jewelry box. No iconic red box was waiting for me there. Whoever was wearing the gift from Cartier, it wasn't the woman who had helped build Julian's success from the ground up. The charge was immediately followed by a series of weekend hotel bookings at the nearby Sycamore Creek Lodge, a luxury resort area just an hour outside the city, and a string of restaurant charges for 2 at intimate, expensive places I'd only read about, but he had never taken me. I printed every single statement, creating a detailed, chronological timeline in a heavily password-protected file on my personal laptop. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was deeply, fundamentally financial. My years of contributions to our shared life, my sacrificed career, my unwavering support, they were literally funding Julian's escape from it. I remembered how I'd once joked that I knew the firm's accounting system better than Julian did. "That's why I married the smartest woman I know," he'd responded, kissing my forehead with that same patronizing air. The The memory burned now, a hot coal in my chest, as I uncovered a clear pattern of escalating cash withdrawals from our joint savings account. $500 here, $800 there, all in untraceable cash. The following Tuesday, while Julian was in court, I called in sick to my volunteer position and dedicated the entire morning to a thorough search of our home. Years of organizing Julian's life had taught me his habits, his patterns, his predictable hiding places. The locked drawer in his bedside table yielded nothing unusual, just the expected collection of expensive cufflinks and watches I'd given him over the years. The false bottom in his closet shoe rack contained only his passport and birth certificate, exactly where I expected them to be. I was on the verge of giving up when I noticed something odd about his golf bag, which had been left untouched in the corner of the study since the previous season. Julian hadn't played around in months, claiming his work schedule was simply too demanding. The bag felt heavier than it should. Tucked away in a side pocket, wrapped carefully in a hand towel monogrammed with the logo of the Sycamore Creek Lodge, I found it, a small black leather notebook. Inside, the pages were filled with his neat, precise handwriting, complex calculations, projections of future living expenses, investment returns, and what appeared to be a proposed division of assets. My name appeared nowhere in these meticulous, forward-thinking plans. Instead, there were chilling notes about clean extraction and untraceable funds. But the most disturbing discovery was a notation beside several major client account numbers, available liquidity before transfer restrictions. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I photographed every single page with my phone before returning the notebook exactly as I had found it. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to steal from his own clients. 2 days later, Chloe's message arrived. I had been in the kitchen, calmly preparing a grocery list for the Aurelian dinner, when my phone chimed with the notification from an unknown Instagram account. The preview showed just enough to freeze the blood in my veins. "He's leaving you and taking all the money. Thought you should see what your husband's been up to." After swiftly and silently securing our finances, I finally opened the full message. There were 5 photographs. Julian and a young woman with sleek, dark hair, wrapped around each other in various states of undress in what I instantly recognized as the premier suite at the Sycamore Creek Lodge. The expression on his face in each image was one I hadn't seen directed at me in years: pure, unadulterated desire. The woman, Chloe, was wearing the very same Cartier diamond necklace I had seen charged to our account. "I'm 28, fertile, and not afraid to go after what I want." Her message continued. "Julian's tired of waiting for you to give him children. We're starting fresh, with the money he's been setting aside. He's just wrapping up some client matters first. You can make this easy, or you can make it difficult, but he's already chosen me." The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the kitchen tile. The screen shattered, the spiderweb of cracks perfectly mirroring the breaking inside my chest. A sound escaped me that I didn't recognize as my own, part sob, part a raw, animal keening, as I slid down the cold surface of the refrigerator to the floor. 13 years of sacrifice, of being the perfect partner, the silent architect of his success, all reduced to a disposable obstacle in his path. The betrayal was absolute, meticulously planned, and breathtakingly cruel. I allowed myself exactly 10 minutes to break down, 10 minutes to feel the full, crushing force of the devastation, to let the hot tears come without restraint. Then I stood up, washed my face, made a fresh, strong cup of coffee, and began to think like the strategic partner I had always been. First, I needed access to Julian's devices. The second phone in his pocket would be impossible to examine without raising his suspicion, but the tablet he often left charging in his study was a potential goldmine of information. Julian, like so many powerful men, maintained the illusion of high security while practicing the laziest form of it, using simple variations of the same password across all his accounts. The tablet unlocked on my third attempt, Our wedding date followed by his mother's birth year. Inside, his email inbox revealed everything draft messages to Chloe outlined their entire escape plan. Julian had been systematically moving client funds through a complex series of shell corporations and transfers, preparing for what he referred to as their fresh start. The Aurelian dinner wasn't just a business opportunity. It was slated to be his final grand performance, before he disappeared with nearly $28 million in client funds, the new identities, the deed to a property in Costa Rica, the offshore account numbers. Everything was meticulously detailed in correspondence he was arrogant enough to believe no one would ever see. The most crushing blow was an email draft addressed to me, scheduled to be sent the morning after the Aurelian dinner. Elena, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. The firm will be facing some significant financial irregularities that I've unfortunately had to leave behind. I'm sorry it had to end this way, but we both know our marriage has been little more than a business arrangement for years. I've found real happiness now, and I deserve a chance to start over. The house is underwater anyway. You can deal with the bank. The tablet nearly slipped from my hands as I processed the sheer magnitude of his callousness. Julian hadn't just planned to leave me. He had orchestrated a scenario where I would be left holding the bag for his extensive financial crimes. The woman who had built his success would be the one left to face his creditors, his furious clients, and the very real possibility of criminal charges, all while he sipped cocktails on a foreign beach with my replacement. I forwarded everything to a secure, encrypted email account I had created, then carefully deleted the sent message and restored the tablet to its exact previous state. Then I printed out the most critical documents and placed them in a safety deposit box that Julian knew nothing about. The bank manager nodded at me politely as I completed the paperwork, completely unaware that I was assembling a war chest of evidence that would utterly destroy the man whose name I still carried. That night, I served Julian his favorite meal, asked about his day, and smiled serenely as he lied about a business meeting I now knew had been a clandestine rendezvous with Chloe. As he spoke, I studied his face, the face I had woken up next to for 15 years, and I realized with chilling clarity that I was looking at a complete stranger, a dangerous stranger who was more than willing to sacrifice me right alongside his professional ethics. The Aurelian dinner is going to change everything for us, he said, raising his wine glass in a toast. For the first time in a very long time, Julian and I were in perfect agreement. The Aurelian dinner is going to change everything for us, Julian had said, and he had no idea just how profoundly right he was. As I cleared the dinner dishes that night, I reflected on the supreme irony of my situation. Most of Julian's colleagues and clients had absolutely no idea that I held a master's degree in financial accounting, or that I had walked away from a very promising career at Deloitte to help him build Vance Sterling from scratch. The narrative Julian had carefully crafted and presented to the world was simple and effective. He was the brilliant, visionary legal mind, and I was the supportive, society wife who organized charity luncheons and remembered everyone's children's names. No one knew that I had personally designed the firm's entire financial infrastructure, or that I still remotely monitored all account activity through secure access protocols I had established years ago. Julian himself had long forgotten that I was the one who had set up the original server passwords and maintained the highest level of administration rights. When the firm finally hired their first full-time accountant 3 years back, I had trained him myself, but had carefully maintained my own backdoor access, just in case of an emergency. The emergency had arrived, wearing a Cartier necklace and carrying a one-way ticket to Costa Rica. The following morning, I began moving on 2 parallel tracks. On the surface, I was the perfect doting corporate wife, consumed with preparations for the pivotal Aurelian dinner. I was on the phone with caterers, meticulously selecting wine pairings, and coordinating with the high-priced event planner Julian had insisted we hire to impress these potential clients. But beneath this flawless exterior of domesticity, I was a forensic accountant, meticulously documenting every single unauthorized transfer Julian had made over the past 6 months. The flower arrangements need to be impressive, but not ostentatious, I explained to the florist on my cell phone, while simultaneously using my laptop to download transaction records that showed Julian's gradual siphoning of funds from client trust accounts. The Aurelians appreciate subtle elegance, not flashy displays, much like Julian himself, who had perfected the art of appearing impeccably trustworthy while plotting grand theft on an epic scale. By mid-afternoon, I had compiled a comprehensive, multi-tabbed spreadsheet that tracked every single diverted dollar. The pattern was crystal clear. Julian had been testing the waters with small, insignificant transfers before growing bolder as he went undetected. The most recent and largest transfers were cleverly masked as legitimate case expenses, but were in fact being routed through a complex series of holding accounts before disappearing into the offshore network he had so carefully established. I downloaded everything, saving encrypted copies to multiple secure cloud locations and a physical hard drive. The next step required delicate timing and a bit of social engineering. I needed to contact Arthur Sterling, the senior partner who had originally mentored Julian, without raising any suspicion. Arthur had semi-retired 2 years earlier, but still maintained considerable influence within the firm and the broader legal community. More importantly, his reputation for unwavering ethical practice was unimpeachable. "Elena, what a pleasant surprise," Arthur said warmly when I called. "Please tell me Julian finally convinced you to take that European vacation you've been postponing for years." I managed to laugh, the sound almost natural despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Not quite yet, Arthur. Actually, I'm calling about the Aurelian dinner. I was hoping Margaret might be willing to share her grandmother's famous chocolate soufflé recipe. I remember how much everyone raved about it at your anniversary party." "I'm sure she'd be delighted," he replied. "Why don't you stop by tomorrow afternoon? Margaret would love to see you, and I've been meaning to discuss something with Julian about the old Patterson case anyway. Perfect. An innocent, plausible reason to visit without raising Julian's suspicions, and a golden opportunity to plant the first seeds of concern with the one person whose opinion Julian truly valued and feared." That evening, I casually mentioned to Julian that I'd be visiting the Sterlings the following day. Margaret's going to give me her chocolate soufflé recipe for the Aurelian dinner. "Oh, and Arthur mentioned he wants to discuss the Patterson case with you too. Should I relay anything specific?" Julian frowned slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "The Patterson case? That's odd. That matter was settled months ago." I shrugged with a practiced, casual nonchalance. Maybe he's just feeling nostalgic. You know how he gets about his old cases now that he's semi-retired. "Probably," Julian agreed, his attention already drifting back to his phone. Likely another breathless message from Chloe. "Tell him I'll call him this weekend." It was a call that would never happen if my timeline proceeded as planned. The next day, I arrived at the Sterlings' comfortable, stately home with a small gift basket and my most convincing, earnest smile. Margaret welcomed me warmly, but I could tell immediately that Arthur had concerns that went far beyond soufflé recipes. "Elena," he said after the preliminary pleasantries were exchanged, his voice low and serious, "is everything all right? With Julian? With the firm?" I hesitated for just a moment, long enough to appear conflicted rather than calculated. "What makes you ask that, Arthur?" "Call it an old lawyer's intuition," he said, his eyes searching mine. "The Aurelian account is a tremendous opportunity, but Julian seems unusually urgent about finalizing everything immediately after the dinner. Most corporate clients of that size take weeks, even months, to formalize their legal representation." I stirred my tea, allowing my hand to tremble just slightly. Julian's been under a lot of pressure lately. He doesn't share much of the firm's business with me anymore, but I have noticed some changes." "What kind of changes?" he pressed gently. "It's probably nothing," I said. my voice carefully modulated to suggest that it was very much something he's just been working unusual hours, taking calls in private. I'm sure it's just the stress of the Aurelian presentation. Arthur's expression told me he had taken the bait. The seed of doubt had been successfully planted. It wasn't enough to trigger any immediate action, but it was sufficient to make him receptive and ready when the full dossier of evidence arrived in his inbox on the night of the dinner. On my way home, I stopped at an electronics store and purchased a small but powerful device that would allow me to clone Julian's work phone while he was sleeping. The tech-savvy college student who sold it to me assured me it would bypass most standard security measures with ease. I also bought a new high-powered laptop with cache, one that Julian would never know existed. That night, I worked late in my home office, ostensibly finalizing the seating chart and menu for the dinner, while actually establishing remote access to every single financial account Julian controlled. I created a series of digital tripwires that would alert me to any large-scale transfers and prepared a sequence of counter-commands that could be executed with a single tap. The most challenging part of the entire operation was maintaining my composure during my daily interactions with Julian. Each morning, I prepared his favorite breakfast and listened with a placid smile to his plans for the day, knowing full well that many of them involved Chloe. Each evening, I asked him about his work while secretly monitoring which client accounts he had accessed and probed each night. I lay beside him in our bed, the warmth of his body a grotesque reminder of his betrayal, and I would silently calculate exactly how I would dismantle the new life he was planning to steal from me. 3 days before the Aurelian dinner, Julian came home with an expensive bottle of champagne and a rare, ostentatious display of affection. "What's the occasion?" I asked as he poured 2 crystal flutes. "Just appreciating my brilliant wife," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "I couldn't have built any of this without you, Elena. After the Aurelian dinner, I think we should finally sit down and seriously discuss taking that European vacation you've always wanted." I smiled back at him, the expression feeling like a mask. "That sounds wonderful. I've always wanted to see the world with you." The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. His final manipulation was to make me feel valued and seen, just moments before he planned to discard me like trash. Little did he know that while he was plotting his grand escape with a younger woman, I had already ensured that the only place he would be going after the Aurelian dinner was straight into financial and professional ruin. The woman behind his money was about to step into the spotlight, and Julian had no idea that his audience was about to witness his final devastating act. The evening of the Aurelian dinner arrived with impossibly perfect weather. The sky was clear, and a gentle breeze rustled through the delicate leaves of the Japanese maple trees surrounding the private dining room at the Gilded Anchor, the most exclusive and sought-after restaurant in the city. I had selected every single detail personally: the hand-calligraphed place cards, the locally sourced seasonal flowers arranged in understated crystal vases, and a menu that perfectly balanced impressive culinary artistry with an approachable elegance. The private room glowed with a soft amber lighting that flattered every face, making everyone appear more vibrant, more powerful, more successful. As I looked around the room while the first guests began to arrive, a strange and profound calm settled over me. This room, in all its opulent glory, represented the culmination of 15 years spent creating the perfect backdrop for Julian's soaring ambitions. Tonight would be my final performance as the devoted, invisible corporate wife, and my grand debut as the architect of his spectacular downfall. I wore a classic, timeless black dress paired with a single strand of pearls that Julian had given me on our 10th anniversary. My makeup was flawless, my hair arranged in a sophisticated updo that had taken my stylist 40 minutes to perfect. No one looking at me would ever suspect that beneath my composed, serene exterior lay a tactical command center on high alert. My new, untraceable phone was tucked safely into an inner pocket of my clutch, pre-programmed with a series of timed commands set to execute at precise intervals throughout the evening. "Elena, you've truly outdone yourself," remarked Gregory Aurelian as he entered with his wife, Rebecca. The billionaire industrialist looked exactly as his numerous magazine profiles suggested: silver-haired, impeccably fit, and perpetually evaluating everyone around him for their potential value. "Julian promised us an exceptional evening, but this is simply remarkable." "You're too kind," I replied, taking Rebecca's hand warmly in mine, Julian, "and I believe that a meticulous attention to detail reflects how we approach everything in life." I caught his eye meaningfully. Including our client relationships, Julian appeared at my side, clapping Gregory on the shoulder with a practiced, easy familiarity. "Greg, I see you've met the secret weapon of Vance Sterling. Elena makes everything look completely effortless. A woman's touch really does make all the difference," Rebecca commented, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. I smiled, a genuine, knowing smile this time, knowing that none of them could possibly realize just how much of a difference my touch would make tonight. More guests arrived. The senior partners from Julian's firm with their spouses, key executives from Aurelian Dynamics, and a few strategic connections Julian had insisted on including. Arthur Sterling entered last, his shrewd, intelligent eyes taking in the entire room before settling on me with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know what it was. As the cocktail hour progressed, I excused myself to check on the dinner arrangements, slipping into the restaurant's private office that the manager had kindly allowed me to use for any last-minute coordination. There, with my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm, I activated the first phase of my plan. With a few swift taps on my hidden phone, I initiated a series of transfers that effectively canceled and blocked Julian's elaborate network of offshore movements. Another series of commands sent the comprehensive evidence packages to the inboxes of every partner in the firm, all scheduled to arrive with precise timing. Just as dessert was being served, I rejoined the party just as Julian was holding court with the Aurelians, regaling them with an embellished story about a particularly challenging case from years ago. And that's when I realized the precedent from the 1998 Harmon decision could be applied. It completely transformed our entire approach. What Julian conveniently failed to mention was that I was the one who had discovered that precedent during one of my many all-night research sessions early in our marriage. I had woken him up at 3 a.m., buzzing with excitement over the finding, only to have him present it as his own brilliant breakthrough in court the very next day. "Fascinating approach," Gregory commented, clearly impressed. "Your analytical skills are quite remarkable." "Julian has always had a keen eye for overlooked details," I added pleasantly, sipping my sparkling water. "It's one of his many talents." Julian shot me a curious look, perhaps detecting a subtle, unusual edge in my tone. I simply raised my glass slightly before turning to answer a question from Rebecca about the wine selection. As we moved to the dining table, Julian took his position at the head, with Gregory Aurelian seated at his right. I sat at the opposite end, the perfect hostess overseeing the seamless service. The first course arrived, a delicate seared scallop with a citrus reduction that drew appreciative murmurs from around the table. Halfway through the main course of herb-crusted lamb, I excused myself once more, ostensibly to ensure the dessert preparation was on schedule. In reality, I was in the office, confirming that my digital tripwires remained undetected. Julian had attempted to access the offshore accounts twice during dinner. His face betrayed nothing, but his phone, buzzing discreetly in his pocket, was informing him of repeated access errors. I could almost feel the rising tide of panic behind his practiced, charming smile. When I returned to the dining room, a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. The maitre d' was attempting to block someone from entering our private space. A woman's voice, insistent and slightly slurred, carried over his polite, hushed objections. I know he's in there. Julian Vance. I need to speak with him right now. My heart raced, but my expression remained placid as Chloe pushed past the flustered staff member and stumbled into our carefully orchestrated dinner party. She wore the Cartier diamond pendant prominently displayed against a dress that was far too revealing for the venue. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes wild with what appeared to be a volatile cocktail of anger and fear. "Julian!" she cried, spotting him at the head of the table. "Why aren't you answering my calls? Something's wrong with the accounts." The room fell into a dead, shocked silence. Julian froze, his fork suspended midway to his mouth as every head in the room swiveled from Chloe to him. I could practically hear the sound of professional relationships cracking and shattering in the profound silence. "I'm sorry," Julian finally managed, standing slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is a misunderstanding. This woman she's a client who's clearly distressed. If you'll all excuse me for just a moment." "A client?" Chloe's laugh was a harsh, bitter sound. "Is that what we're calling it now? Tell them, Julian. Tell them about Costa Rica and how you promised we'd leave right after this dinner." Gregory Aurelian's expression hardened into a mask of stone as he carefully placed his linen napkin beside his plate. "Julian," he said, his voice dangerously low. "What exactly is happening here? It's nothing, Greg. A simple misunderstanding. If you'll just excuse me for one moment to handle this." Julian grabbed Chloe's arm, his grip tight, and began pulling her toward the hallway, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. I timed my next move perfectly, waiting until dessert, Margaret Sterling's famous chocolate soufflé, was being served. As the waitstaff presented the delicate, magnificent creations, a new sound filled the room. The synchronized buzzing of phones around the table. Every single partner was simultaneously receiving the digital dossier detailing Julian's systematic theft. Arthur Sterling looked down at his phone, his face growing grim, then looked up and met my eyes with an expression of dawning, horrified confirmation of his deepest suspicions. Julian returned to the room alone, his complexion ashen, just as Gregory Aurelian was scrolling through the damning documents on his own phone. The timing couldn't have been more perfect if I had choreographed it myself. "Julian," Gregory said, his voice cold as ice as he stood up from the table. "I believe this dinner is concluded. Greg, whatever you've received, I can explain." "I sincerely doubt that," Gregory interrupted, standing to his full height, Rebecca. "We're leaving. Elena, thank you for a lovely meal. Under the circumstances." As the Aurelians departed, a frantic Julian pulled out his corporate credit card to settle the exorbitant bill, a desperate attempt to maintain some last pathetic semblance of control. The waiter returned moments later, leaning in to whisper in Julian's ear, but his voice was loud enough for those of us remaining at the table to hear clearly, "I'm so sorry, sir. Your card has been declined." Julian fumbled for another card, then a third. Each was declined with the same apologetic murmur from the staff. His face flushed a deep, blotchy red, then drained to a sickly, pale white as the full reality of his situation finally began to sink in. "Elena," he managed, his voice a low growl through clenched teeth. A word, but it was too late. Arthur Sterling stepped forward, his own phone held firmly in his hand. "Julian, the partners have already convened an emergency call. Your access to all firm accounts and properties has been suspended, pending a full investigation." Julian's scream of pure, unadulterated rage, as the full impact of his utter ruin dawned on him, was indeed the sweetest and most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of justice, served on a silver platter at the very dinner he had planned as his grand finale. Julian's rage-filled scream echoed through the now silent private dining room as the remaining partners exchanged uncomfortable, shocked glances. He lunged toward me, his carefully constructed lawyerly facade completely shattered, his face contorted in a mask of pure fury. "What have you done?" he hissed, gripping the edge of the polished mahogany table so hard his knuckles turned bone white. "You think you're so clever? You have no idea what you've just started." "Actually, Julian," I replied, my voice remarkably steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, "I've just ended what you started." I stood and turned to face the stunned faces gathered around the table. "Gentlemen, I believe you've all received some rather troubling information regarding the firm's finances. I am prepared to answer any questions you might have." Arthur Sterling stepped forward, instinctively positioning himself slightly between Julian and me in a protective gesture that brought an unexpected sting of tears to my eyes. "Elena," he said gravely, his voice heavy with the weight of the situation, "these documents, they suggest a systematic and egregious theft of client funds over the past 6 months. Did you compile this evidence yourself?" "Yes," I said, my voice clear and firm. I opened my clutch and withdrew a small, sleek USB drive. This contains the complete documentation, including recorded wire transfers, falsified expense reports, and all correspondence pertaining to the offshore accounts. I've been managing the firm's financial systems since its founding. When I noticed irregularities, I investigated. The 3 remaining partners huddled together, speaking in hushed, urgent tones, while Julian watched them with a growing, desperate panic. I could see the exact moment when the full realization dawned on him, how completely and utterly his world was collapsing, how thoroughly and flawlessly I had outmaneuvered him at every turn. "You can't prove anything," Julian snarled, attempting to regain some of his legal composure, his voice dripping with condescension. "Any decent lawyer will tear your amateur investigation to shreds in court." Liam Hayes, the youngest partner and once Julian's most promising protege, looked up from his phone, his face pale with disbelief. "The State Bar Association has already been notified, Julian. And apparently your girlfriend caused quite a scene in the restaurant lobby before security escorted her out. She was rather explicit about your relationship and your future plans." Julian's face contorted with a fresh wave of fury. "This is ridiculous. Elena is my wife. She has no legal authority to access firm accounts or private client information. Everything she's done is illegal." For the first time that entire evening, I allowed myself a small, genuine smile. I no longer had to maintain the facade of the perfect, supportive wife. Actually, I've been an authorized administrator on all firm accounts since inception. "You can check the incorporation paperwork, Julian. You signed it yourself during our first year of business. You were always too busy to bother with what you called administrative details back then." The look of dawning horror that spread across his face was almost comical. "You never removed my access," I continued, my voice calm and measured. "And as for authority, I haven't done anything but observe and document your actions. You are the one who stole client funds." Just then, the restaurant manager appeared, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and anxiety. "I'm very sorry to interrupt, but we must insist on settling the bill for tonight's event." Arthur Sterling wordlessly handed over his personal credit card, his disappointed eyes never leaving Julian's face. "I believe we should continue this discussion at the office, immediately." As the remaining partners escorted a sputtering, protesting Julian out of the restaurant, I remained seated, a sudden and profound exhaustion washing over me. The adrenaline that had carried me through weeks of meticulous planning and this single dramatic evening began to ebb, leaving a hollow ache in its place. "Are you coming, Elena?" Arthur asked gently from the doorway. "In a moment," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "I just need to thank the staff." After the room had finally emptied, I sat alone at the grand table that had cost more than my first car to reserve, surveying the wreckage of the evening, half-eaten desserts, abandoned wine glasses, and discarded napkins. The wreckage of the dinner mirrored the wreckage of my marriage. So beautiful and perfect on the surface, so completely destroyed underneath. I followed the partners to the firm 30 minutes later, having composed myself for the final act of the night. The atmosphere in the conference room was frigid when I arrived. Julian sat isolated at one end of the long table, a pariah in his own kingdom, while the partners and their hastily summoned attorney occupied the other end. Mrs. Vance, the firm's attorney, began, his tone formal and cautious. "This is all highly irregular, but given the circumstances—" "It's Miss Callahan," I interrupted, reclaiming my maiden name for the first time in 15 years, the words feeling both strange and liberating on my tongue. And there is nothing irregular about protecting client assets from a thief. For the next 2 hours, I methodically and dispassionately walked them through Julian's entire elaborate scheme, using a projector to display the spreadsheets and documents I had so carefully prepared. I highlighted how he had planned to disappear with millions in client funds immediately following the Aurelian dinner, leaving them to deal with the fallout. With each new revelation, Julian seemed to physically shrink in his chair, his initial bravado replaced by a grim, silent resignation. What surprised me most was when Margaret Sterling arrived halfway through my presentation, followed closely by Diane Hayes and Patricia Foster, the wives of the other two partners. They slipped quietly into seats along the back wall, their expressions a mixture of shock, concern, and something that looked remarkably like admiration. When the initial crisis meeting finally concluded at nearly 2 a.m., Julian was unceremoniously escorted from the building by security, his key cards and all access privileges revoked. The partners immediately initiated emergency protocols to protect the remaining client funds and begin preparing for the inevitable legal and public relations nightmare that lay ahead. As I was gathering my things in the hallway, Margaret approached me. "We're having breakfast tomorrow at my house. 9 a.m. You should join us. I'm not sure that would be appropriate, given everything." I gestured vaguely at the controlled chaos unfolding around us. "Elena," she said firmly, her hand resting on my arm, "for 15 years, I have watched you build this firm right alongside Arthur. The same goes for Diane and Patricia, with their husbands. We know exactly what it means to be the invisible foundation. It's high time we all talked about at 9 o'clock. That breakfast meeting proved to be a turning point I never could have anticipated. Over coffee and scones in Margaret's sunlit kitchen, I found myself surrounded by women who understood my experience on a level no one else could. They shared their own stories of unacknowledged contributions, of their own expertise being dismissed as helping out, of brilliant careers sacrificed for their husbands' ambitions. The only difference, Diane pointed out, a wry smile on her face, is that you kept detailed records and maintained your access. That was absolutely brilliant. It was a survival instinct, I admitted. I never truly trusted that Julian saw me as an equal partner. "None of them do," Patricia said quietly, a sad truth hanging in the air. "But that doesn't mean we can't use our skills elsewhere." The conversation that morning planted a seed, an idea that would take root and flourish over the difficult months that followed. While Julian faced disbarment proceedings and multiple criminal charges, I navigated my own legal challenges. Our divorce was expedited. Given the circumstances of his egregious fraud, I declined alimony, asking only to keep our home, which was now in my restored maiden name. The criminal investigation ultimately revealed that Julian had been more desperate than calculated. He'd accumulated massive gambling debts on top of funding his affair with Chloe, who, predictably, disappeared from his life the moment the money dried up. The man I thought I knew had been unraveling for far longer than I had ever realized, his perfect, polished facade hiding multiple layers of destructive secrets. 6 months after the infamous Blackwell dinner, I sat across from a commercial real estate agent, signing a lease for a modest but elegant office space downtown Callahan. Financial forensics would specialize in detecting fraud and financial mismanagement for law firms and small businesses. My first 3 clients were already lined up, arranged through a discreet referral network that Margaret, Diane, and Patricia had helped me establish among their considerable social and professional connections. On opening day, a stunning, enormous flower arrangement arrived from Arthur Sterling with a simple note that read, "Credit finally, where credit has always been due." As I arranged a stack of my new business cards on my desk, Elena Callahan, President CEO, I thought about the woman I had been just a year ago, invisibly managing Julian's world while he was secretly planning my disposal. The journey from there to here had been excruciatingly painful, but as I looked around at the office that bore my own name, I finally felt the sweet, profound satisfaction of reclaiming my own worth. I was no longer the silent partner. I had finally found my own voice, and I was discovering that it was a voice worth listening to. After all, end of story.